Does your event management software come with a team of event and hospitality pros? Ours does. Concierge.com by Condé Nast is a full-service registration and guest management solution focused on creating an exceptional guest experience. From customized invites, registration, and itineraries to travel booking, communication, and on-site check-in, the Concierge.com team handles everything using our ingenious guest management software. Visit Concierge.com to see how we can help you and how we can make every guest feel like a VIP.
Are you a follower?
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna be at
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hey Beth, here we are, another podcast.
Well, one of our most popular episodes ever of GatherGeeks was a look at hiring and hot jobs in the event industry. So we thought we would revisit the topic and update it for what's happening now. Our guest is Dawn Penfold. She's president of Meeting Jobs, a national search firm serving the meetings industry. She's regularly working with both employers and employees to place event professionals in jobs. So she's on top of all the hiring trends. For our listeners, if you're looking to get a new job in events, or if you're about to hire someone and want to make sure you're competitive in the market, this is the episode for you.
Yeah, with the employment rate the way it is, there is a lot of opportunity for people looking for jobs and for employers to find the right people.
Right. We're going to look at both perspectives today. We're also going to talk about the state of the job market, the differences in the job market for millennials versus boomers, with a little discussion of Gen Z thrown in. And we'll get some advice for companies who are writing job descriptions to attract the best candidates. Let's take a listen. Dawn, welcome back to GatherGeeks, and thanks for joining us today. This is a part two of our conversation with you about hot jobs in meetings and events. And so let's just start off with a very general sense of where the industry is now. Is this a good market for candidates? Is this a good market for hiring managers? Where do we stand right now?
Well, and again, it depends on the day. It all depends on the day. If you had to say what it looks like right now, I would say that the candidate pool is far smaller right now. Hiring officials are looking for solid candidates, and the candidates are not there. A couple of reasons for it. One is that the candidate is looking at the political situation right now, looking at the stock market right now, which is a little volatile, as well as the political situation, and truly wondering if they're going to be moving into another job where they may be the last person in, not knowing what kind of bubble could burst. So candidates are a little hesitant about moving right now. So that's the one reason. The second reason is that I still feel that we're getting some fallback from the recession that hit, I think it was back in 2008, when we were recovering from that. So there's a challenge to find candidates who were let go at that time, didn't re-enter the industry, or finding that person who it would probably be about 8 to 10 years experience and solid experience, because, as I said, there were massive layoffs in our industry during the recession. So there are two reasons that it is hard to find a good candidate right now. The other reason that I think is going on right now is that hiring officials are still being very particular on the niche industries that they're looking for. So they're looking for association, they're looking for financial, they're looking for pharma, they're looking for medical, they're looking for insurance, they're looking for those areas, and then subcategories within those places. So a financial company may be looking for somebody who can handle road shows. A pharma company may be looking for a speakers bureau manager. And then let's add to it, candidates now are looking at the new free flex time. The person who can work from their home, commute into the city or commute into their job only 2 days a week, be the virtual candidate. They're seeing that out there. However, I think our industry is dragging their feet in accepting that And so a candidate is saying, hey, I want to work virtually. And the hiring official is saying, no, we want you in the office. How come you don't want to come in every day?
I mean, does it mean that like the employers are not trusting the employees? Is that kind of?
I think there's some that it's not trust. It's more of just what they're used to. I mean, there may be some old guardness there that says, well, gee, if we want to have a meeting and discuss this conference coming up, and, we can just go to your office and talk to you about it instead of attempting to pick up the phone or do a Zoom meeting or do a Skype meeting. I think it's not trust. I think it's just old guard.
Fear?
Could be fear. It could be fear that the person's not doing the work that they normally would do. But my opinion is that 10 to 1, if somebody's working virtually and getting the job done, they're probably working more than a traditional 8 to 10 hour day.
That's interesting. It seems to me that is part of the solution potentially to this shallow candidate pool at this point.
Yeah. I cannot tell you what a difference it makes. I worked on a search last month, and they required the candidate to work in the office in New York City. And the response was about 25 or 30 solid candidates. Another company, almost the exact same specs for the hiring official for the position, said they would consider a virtual candidate, and I received 480 resumes.
Wow.
I mean, it is so, when somebody tells me we have a search and we'll consider a virtual candidate, I sit there and go, okay, here we go. Let's get on this roller coaster for the ride, because there are so many candidates who want to work virtually. You've got and, they've got the skill sets.
And is this part of the conversation you have when you're talking with
all the time,
managers?
All the time. I will tell, in fact, I just did it today. I will tell, I will advise a hiring official, you will get a much higher quality and more candidates to consider if you consider allowing somebody to work from home.
Is that also the geographical footprint of the hiring organizing body as well, or is it people from all around the world?
We basically work in the United States, so I don't know. I mean, I will get candidates from around the world, but most of the time, my hiring officials do want somebody at least within the United States.
But within the metro area of the place that they're hiring, so that they can come in, or does it matter?
If they had their choice, they would hire somebody down the block.
But is that normally the case, or are they choosing people that are outside the geographically desirable area?
It's most of the time the case. Most of the time they're hiring somebody locally.
Even though they're virtual.
That will be their first choice. That's where they'll go to first.
How does that affect salaries? Because I would think your candidate in New York is going to want to or need, based on cost of living, a higher salary. What does it do when that virtual candidate lives?
Well, there's two issues with salary. What I have found, if somebody's working virtually, they will usually be paid lower or accept a lower salary. And the obvious reasons are the cost of commuting, the cost of clothing, the cost of just going into an office every day.
Is it significant?
It can be sometimes $15,000, $20,000.
Wow.
Annually. Now, if the job is I'm going to make up a city, in Idaho, and the candidate let's do it the other way. If a job is in New York City and they're considering a candidate from Idaho, they may adjust the salary to be closer to what the cost of living and the salary requirements are in Idaho. The hiring official will consider this a way to get a great employee at a lower cost. They won't pay New York, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Washington salaries for somebody who may be in a lower cost of living.
Mm-hmm. So this concept of the virtual candidate versus somebody that's working in office, does it make a difference what sector we're talking about? Does it work better for certain sectors versus others?
I don't know. It depends on the hiring official and how they have set up their office. I can't answer that because it really depends on the position and how the hiring official deals with this remote candidate. It's a hard question to answer without knowing what the job specs are.
Let me go in a little bit of another area, and that is everyone says to me that any big company has usually meeting and event people on staff. Is that true, or what do you see?
Most major corporations will have somebody who's designated to be meetings and events, and it could be a department that's under marketing. It could be a department under, most of the time I see it under marketing or public relations. But they will have most corporations do have somebody in meetings and events.
And does it go down to the brand level, or is it usually, when you're talking about the big corporate world, done at the corporate level?
It's usually done at the corporate level.
And then where does
the brand, the individual brand? You mean if there's offices?
Offices, or like where is the intersection of marketing and events and meetings? Because some of them are doing exactly the same skill set, but they're doing it from a marketing perspective and not just a meeting and event perspective. Is it morphing together?
What I see more is on the corporate level.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the hiring is happening, the more official hiring.
Right. Why should I have to commute an hour and a half or 2 hours a day when I can be using that time to work at home? It could be their knowledge base, that they're much more computer literate. And I don't want to say millennials are not computer literate, because I'm sorry, baby boomers. Baby boomers can be very computer literate also, but their socialization, their ability to work in an office is what they have known their whole career. Where millennials, Generation Y, Generation X, were the first ones to start having virtual offices, and that's what they would like.
So you're saying that they do want to be that they will accept the virtual job as opposed to the boomers that want to be in an office, right? Or no?
Yes,
okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, that makes a ton of sense. But how about the idea that can everyone work from home? I mean, I have problems working from home sometimes. How do you know when you do an interview and you can tell whether somebody is really capable of working from home or not? Is there a kind of a mini test, or do you like a little trick question?
I know personally what I do. I mean, I have worked in a virtual office since 1990, and I remember when I started the company in 1990, and I have staff, and everybody works virtually. I remember people saying to me, people will think you're fly by night if you don't have an office. You really should have an office, and I just could not understand why I should have to pay all that rent in New York City for an office space. And when I look back on it now, it's like, okay, and it worked. I worked really well from a home office or a virtual office, and so did everybody who worked for me. When I interview candidates and say, this is a virtual position, would you like to work from home? I'll ask them how their setup is, what their day is like. And you'll get really, it'll be obvious if somebody, when I say, why do you want to work from home? If they say, well, I want the flexibility to be able to do the laundry when I want to be able to run to my child's soccer game, then you realize that what they want is really flex time. They don't want a virtual office.
So you can determine the kind of candidate. What about the younger people that use the office for socialization?
It's a dilemma. But what you have to do is, the only person who's going to be able to tell that is the hiring official, with seeing what their work is, what their background is, what their track record is.
Okay, so
there's not a set amount of questions that you can say I feel that you can say, yes, this person can work from home. The person usually can tell if they want to work from home. When I'm talking to candidates, they'll know right away if they want a virtual office or not. And I think they know the reasons.
Right. When you're talking with the hiring officials who aren't sure if they want to go that route, are you coaching them on what they're going to have to do to onboard a person like that or work with them? Or is it just a matter of they know or they don't?
I have to be honest with you. I usually don't have the power to do that. You know, a hiring official has usually the parameters that they set in mind for it. Now, if they come back to me and they say, you know, what should we look for in a candidate? I'll be honest and say, well, you should look for somebody who maybe already has a dedicated room for their office, already has dedicated equipment for their office, who has done it before, who understands that, you know, this is the way it is. You know, so it all depends on the hiring official and how much you can help them with that. I think eventually you're going to find more and more people working virtually as we go down the road. I would say, you know, in 5-10 years, you're going to see a larger portion of the workforce in our industry. Again, not in the hotels because they have to be there. You can't have a virtual you can't have a virtual housekeeper. You can't have a virtual, there's tasks at hand. But I think you're going to find more and more salespeople will be working from home and then go to the hotels and give tours or see their clients when they want to. You're going to see more meeting planners who are going to be working virtually and special event planners who are going to be working virtually, and then they go on site or they go into the office when meetings take place.
Well, that's a future of work question that we'll see if that pans out. I wanted to circle back now that we've gotten into that a little bit. Looking at the big picture, you established that there is a shallower candidate pool. How about the number of jobs? Are companies hiring right now?
There are jobs out there. There are more jobs out there than there were 4 years ago. Are the jobs out there to the level where people think that they're hearing the jobs are out there? I don't think so.
What does that mean? You mean that it's like in the Underground Railroad?
I think okay. What I'm trying to say is that we're hearing a lot on the news. We're hearing a lot on television. We're hearing a lot through politics, through networks and everything, that jobs are opening up because of the new tax bill, because of this, because of that the jobs are out there, and I'm not seeing them yet. And I think that the job market is opening up more and more and more, but there's not a huge amount of jobs.
Okay, so not a huge amount of jobs, not a huge amount of candidates right now. What does that mean for the industry? Does that give you a sense in terms of trends? Is it growing? Is it contracting? Are we?
I think everybody's holding
down?
tight right now. I think everybody's holding tight right now, just seeing what's going to shake out.
I mean, I think that one of the things that I'm seeing is that a lot of the gathering jobs are on the marketing side, where they're using it for, it's not an official event organizer necessarily or meeting planner, but marketers are doing more and more events. And they're hiring agencies to do it. And there's a lot of work on that side.
Yeah, I think as in the last couple of years, the third-party companies are booming more than the corporate level or the association level.
That's interesting. Go a little bit deeper into that. Is it the time to have a third-party meeting and event agency or a group?
I think it's time to take them more seriously. I don't know if it's time to start one. I would take it. It's time to realize that a third-party event company or meeting management company is a legitimate route for working now, where maybe before people would say, oh, I don't want to work for them because they're not the actual corporation or they're not the actual association. But third-party companies are a very important source in employment in our industry now.
And when you say third party, are you talking like a destination management company, a meeting planning company?
I'm talking about destination meeting management companies, third party, the site selection companies, the people who will say to a company, let me do a part of your meeting, let me do the branding, let me do the event part, let me do the registration part, where a company may outsource certain aspects of the meeting. Those third parties are now hiring people.
And is that where you're getting a lot of candidates going that route as opposed to into the company directly?
I'm getting candidates that's where they're going, because those are more the jobs that are available.
So there's a company called First, an agency called First here in New York that I know of that embeds people in Goldman Sachs and all the financial companies. Are you seeing that happening?
You mean they're an implant?
They're an implant. Is that implanting is a big deal now?
Yeah, I mean, more and more companies are outsourcing their meeting departments. Yeah, Goldman was one of the first ones to do it about 15 years ago.
And using this implant, though, the idea of keeping people in.
Keeping people in, but keeping people off the payroll,
right,
of the corporation,
right.
And what they're doing is, the unfortunate aspect is that the third party companies pay considerably less than what the corporate position would have paid,
which makes it advantageous for a corporation to go that route because they're cutting their overhead.
Exactly.
Now, we just interviewed a few months ago the KPMG people, and they're going the exact opposite route because
they are. I know, and they were one of the forerunners of outsourcing. They were also one of the forerunners of virtual offices.
So, what do you make of that?
I don't know. I have no idea because, part of me is saying, well, somebody has sat there and looked at what the situation is and said, let's try it back this way. It's like they're recreating the wheel.
However, though, from their argument, the way we've heard it was that the great news about, especially when you're dealing with high net worth individuals and service companies, that the event people are part of the relationship process. And that if you outsource it, then you're giving away your relationship a little bit. And so that was the argument that we were hearing from them.
It all depends on the company
Yes.
and what they put the importance on. One company may put the importance on, we need to cut headcount now, so we need to do this. Another company may say, gee, we cut headcount, but we're losing the face-to-face. I mean, when I was a corporate planner, the fact that we had to know, and in fact, I was with an accounting firm, and the knowledge that you had of the different partners, of the clients of the partners, was so key, that we would do their meetings over and over and over again, and there was never any questions to be asked about it. And you knew which partners had more clout than other partners.
So do you see it swinging back to this sort of the pendulum to this at some point?
I'm not seeing it swing back. They're one of the first people I've seen do this.
In fact, they're building a huge conference facility because they're almost doubling down on more face-to-face.
And that's not new. Most of the accounting firms have built their own conference facilities.
And the strategy around that is what? What do you think?
To bring people into one place, so for training programs, and most of those conference facilities will probably be for training programs.
Right.
But, you have one place and you can negotiate rooms more, because you're at one location. You can negotiate food and beverage destination management companies. If you've got a large influx of people going into one area, you have a lot more power to do that. Plus, then you only have to hire staff at that area to handle the meetings.
Right.
So some more big picture questions. The jobs that you are hired to fill, are they full-time? Are they part-time? Are they gigs? What's the trend looking like from your perspective?
Okay, well, we mostly only deal with full-time jobs. So most of them are coming in as full-time positions. We will occasionally get a position that they say we will consider a contractor. But the trend I'm seeing more and more that companies are accepting contractors. as part of their team. It's like I think the term is the iGig,
right. Yeah.
economy right now. So, and I think where this area is good is for the baby boomers and Generation X, because, especially the baby boomers are we're at the tail end of our careers right now. And companies don't want to hire, are really hesitant about hiring baby boomers for various reasons. So the baby boomers I'm seeing are becoming more consultants and doing aspects of the meetings or portions of a meeting where their expertise is. Mm-hmm. And I think that generation has to accept that this is where they're going right now. But companies are being more open to the contract person.
Do you, as someone who has a background in corporate planning, what are your feelings about that in terms of is that good for the industry?
Good for the industry as a whole. Again, it depends. I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, I'm more of a traditionalist. I would like to see a corporation have a meeting professional or an event professional on staff and treat them as a professional in their corporation with benefits, offering everything that a corporation can offer or a third-party company can offer. I think a contractor is kind of left out in the cold sometimes because they're treated as a contractor. They don't have the benefits. They don't build that corporate, joie de vivre. They haven't built that up. And so it could hurt the industry in the long run. But so I think I would tend to say the corporate structure is better. But trying to keep people employed, trying to keep people paying their rent and paying their mortgages, if the contract way is the way to go, that's what we have to do.
What are you seeing as the biggest skill that these sort of late career boomers need to stay relevant?
Social media interaction as it deals with meetings. We're finding hiring officials now, technology is so key. And we're not talking about technology of knowing Microsoft Office. We're talking about technology about knowing about how to promote meetings through Twitter, how to promote meetings through, or how to market meetings, or how to do registration through Facebook, and how to count people and do brand management and when they're moving from room to room to room at conferences. Social media and technology are so key. And, that is what the baby boomer has to really tie into. And that's what the millennials know.
Well, how do you train for that?
Expertise.
How do you get, I always say I like to consider myself the oldest millennial in the history of the planet because I try to keep up on everything. But how does a contemporary of mine in their 50s and 60s keep up, or 40s even, keep up with the tech? What do they do? What's your suggestion, and what do you see when you advise a candidate?
I think that's the key. I think that's the dilemma of everybody, no matter what generation you're in, is just keeping up. You've got people who are just live for this stuff and will go on the internet and read about it. And you've got wonderful organizations like yourself, who educate people at your conferences and through your magazines and through your emails and through your newsletters, and and are great teachers, for our industry. You just have to seek it out there. I don't think the community colleges or the colleges are really good foundations for this area, but I think online education maybe.
And how do you know when you interview, like you're interviewing a candidate, they lose their job, and you're advising them on, okay, you're going to get another corporate job. What do you tell them to do to get briefed for that next interview that'll make them relevant? Like, what do you physically say? What do you say? okay, you should go do X, Y, and Z, like real practical.
First of all, I'll tell them to go to the professional associations,
Yeah.
And to the professional publications. Those are the two areas I'll tell them to go to get their knowledge.
Are you
base
honest?
up.
Do you do radical honesty with them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why some people don't call me.
You're an idiot.
Because I'm so brutally honest with them.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
But it can't be a surprise, right? That they are lacking this in their skill set, right?
there are a lot of people who think they're BSing their way through.
And you pick up on that right away.
When I try to qualify their BS, they get you can tell right away. You can just tell right away. It's if somebody says on their interview that they are strong in technology and social media skills, the first thing I'll go to is look at their LinkedIn profile.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have a complete LinkedIn profile, how are they strong in social media?
Right. That is so
I'll
smart.
check them out on Facebook.
Yeah.
I'll ask them, the first thing that I'll identify if somebody says they're strong in social media and on their resume they don't even have their LinkedIn profile listed or linked. They won't even put a link in there. That's such basic stuff.
So when you recommend a candidate like at a top level, the first thing that I do, I'm sure to other candidates, is look them up, look at their footprint. And
yep.
I mean, that is still like the easiest thing to possibly do.
That is so common right now. And it's so amazing to me because there are two dilemmas with LinkedIn. First of all, every hiring official, the first thing they'll do before they even call the candidate or text them, we text candidates now, but before they contact them, they'll look up their LinkedIn profile.
That's the number one place. That's the number
one place. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing they'll do. They don't do it to, and some hiring officials, that's their number one source for recruitment too. So the LinkedIn profile is very important. I always tell candidates that if they don't have a picture on a LinkedIn profile, they are screaming that they're old. And some candidates will say, well, I don't want them to know that I am old. And I said, they'll find out eventually. Mm-hmm. So if they have this predisposition of not hiring somebody who's old, they're not going to change when they talk to you. They really won't. This is a prejudice. So instead, have a good picture. Don't have an old picture. Have a good picture.
Right. And on the opposite end of the age spectrum, do Gen Xers, because we're moving into, Gen Z, we're moving into that direction. Do they have LinkedIn profiles, or do they see that as something for old people?
For old people.
So how do you convince them that they need it?
Generation, and I'll say, and I'll talk to some, and there aren't that many out there. I mean, this is the first Gen Zs who are coming, have just graduated from college. They're 22, 23 years old, I think. But I'll say, where's your LinkedIn profile? And they go, oh, well, that's just for older people. And I go, well, they're not going to find you. Mm-hmm. It's a Gen Z person who will say to me when I say I need to talk to you on the phone, they say, well, can you text me? No, I need to talk to you. No, we need to have a conversation because believe it or not, there are still people who feel that you have to have a conversation. But the Gen Z people and some of the millennials, when they're looking for jobs now, are looking for cool companies, what they consider cool companies. And that's the other area that I'll talk to a company and say, your job description isn't cool.
What makes something a cool job description?
Showing the vibrancy of the job and the company. So instead of posting a job description or, that is the plain old job description that came from human resources, it has why the company is good. Are we environmentally sound? Do we do good things for other people? What is the typical office day? I mean, I had somebody the other day who posted a job and said that at 3:00 they watch HQ. It's a company activity. We watch HQ at 3:00, and our break room has an espresso machine and a beer tap.
Mm-hmm. And that's why they like it, because it's cool.
They promote. That's a cool company.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're in Portland, Oregon.
How important is the glass door? What's it called? Glassdoor, or these sites that rate the employers?
Glassdoor. It's an interesting site. It's like anything. It's like if you go to TripAdvisor and everybody says a place is great, and you'll get one sour note. It's anything having to do with, there are companies that are good companies that have gotten bad raps because 4 or 5 employees have all gotten together and put reviews on there, and there's really no way of truly truly vetting if those employees actually work there.
Mm-hmm. Well, office culture.
You have to take it. You have to take it with a grain of salt. Of, if it's valid.
Right.
But it's interesting, and it's another place you go to get more information. The more information you have, the better you are.
Right. Well, office culture is in the Zeitgeist right now. Everybody's talking about issues of workplace harassment and what is a good environment and a bad office environment. And I'm wondering if you're running into this either from candidates or from your clients who are hiring you, ways to describe office culture or ways things need to change.
I'm finding the hiring officials in our industry, again, dragging through the mud. They are not, I don't consider our industry real cool when it comes to doing these things. There's still a lot of the old guard. And I'm also finding with candidates, especially Z, I mean, I talked to one the other day, and the first thing they asked, they said, what's the health care? Mm-hmm. Now, if you talk to a millennial, that was really not a lot in the conversation, where Z was, and I talked to the candidate more, and he said, well, I just remember when I was 10 or 11 years old that this is a huge issue. Healthcare was a huge issue. And when you think back of what Generation Z went through, they went through their formative years of being in a recession and the whole healthcare issue. So that's what they're thinking now, which was different from millennials. But trying to tell, and back to, I'm sorry that I went off on a tangent, but with hiring officials trying to make themselves cooler or reflect how cool they are, it all depends on who's writing the copy. And who's running the company. To see if they're open for that. I don't have a lot of control in that. Right. I don't have a lot. I can advise them.
Do you have best case scenarios? Have you seen it really make a difference in terms of the quality or quantity of applications somebody gets? A really well written, lively job description versus something that sounds like the old guard.
Yes, and I will tell them, this is just not a good job description. You're not going to pull a lot of candidates from this. It's like any marketing piece. It is a marketing piece. It's like a real estate ad. It's like a garage sale ad. You have to have a good marketing piece.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. That's a good way to think about it and frame it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a marketing piece. It's marketing their company, the brand of their company, and it's marketing the position.
So what advice
and that hasn't changed. I mean, when I got into the industry and I got my first job as a meeting planner, the reason I was impressed with that ad was because it was in the business section of the New York Times and not just in the want ads.
Do you think that being a meeting and event organizer or an event planner or, the wedding planning thing, or is that it has been an it job that people really love it because it sounds glamorous and sounds fabulous? Is that still the case in the next generation coming up, do you think? Or is it losing some of its luster? Like, and I know you don't deal with Gen Zs a lot.
I don't think it's losing its luster because there are more and more programs in college and online and community college in both social and professional event and meeting management. And I think that, I think it's going to be still a very popular career choice.
Yeah, we wrote about the professionalization of the industry and the more, as you mentioned, educational programs in colleges that are preparing people to enter the meetings and events workforce in a recent issue. And I'm wondering, have you seen the fruit of that? Are people coming in at those entry levels better qualified?
If they've had the proper work with their course program, I will still look for internships. I will still look for did they actually go and work someplace? I mean, like with BizBash, I mean, you bring on a lot of interns, during your conferences and everything. I'll look for something like that to see how serious they were about that. So with the coursework as well as with internships and what they've done, I mean, I'll actually delve back. When did you plan your first event? And what I want to hear and what hiring officials want to hear is what they did in high school and college that showed logistics.
Yeah, it's so funny when we do these interviews, 80% of the people I talk to have had experience back in high school. That gene kind of came through. That they liked doing it, it was exciting to them, and they sort of had a natural inclination for it.
Yeah, I planned my prom.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, that's how most of. But I'm posing a question to ask you is that do you think there's going to be an acceptance among the corporate culture and the association culture that if somebody had social logistics management, like wedding planner, party planners, will they accept that experience in a corporate culture?
Well, that,
or will that,
it's interesting.
That be like, don't say that you were a wedding planner because people will immediately shut down. It's like when we started, it was if you said you were a travel agent, people shut down.
Oh yeah. Well, I speak at Engage a lot, which is a professional wedding that's luxury. It's a luxury wedding conference for luxury planners. And if you raise the hand, 90% of the people don't just do weddings; they do everything. And I think what's happening is that, especially when you do a wedding and you're working with somebody in a company, they gain trust that you know how to maneuver and manipulate and move people and create sort of dynamics of organization. And it actually is more accepted now. People are hiring people because they can run. It's like running a military operation in many cases.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I have seen as well as you have. My husband's a wedding officiant, so I'll go to some of these weddings with him, and I'll see the wedding planner and what they've gone through to plan this wedding. I mean, the weddings are a year long,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
You're dealing with some very challenging personalities.
I think also it depends on how you're framing that experience. If you talk about here's how many moving parts there were, here was my total budget, I'm used to handling X number of dollars, like you can frame it in a way that says I have the skills that can translate.
Yeah, but I wouldn't go in saying, I do flowers for a wedding and try to get a corporate job. I mean,
right. And that's what I was advising a candidate the other day, because she said, well, I'm a wedding planner. And I said, great, I just shut down.
Right.
This is what you need to say. You negotiated contracts. You know about legalese when it comes to contracts. You know about site selection. You know about this. You know about that. And went into it. And I said, you need to back into a corporate job from the social part without the stigma of you planned a bar mitzvah, or you planned a sweet 16 party, or you planned a wedding.
Well, the word party planner is kind of a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and even if you're like the top event organizer for a big corporation, the CEO sometimes says, well, let's call the party planner. And
I know.
it's hard
And
to get the
doesn't it just-
respect.
It just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when it.
It's awful. So as we sort of end this, do you have any, like, over the last year since we talked last, any really weird jobs people have requested in this industry that you didn't quite expect, or has it been pretty traditional?
You didn't prepare me for that question.
I didn't. This is just off the top of my head.
Weird jobs.
Like things that, like, you know how influencers have become such a big deal. Are people looking for different things, or is it still fairly traditional in the meeting side, the professional side?
It's still fairly traditional. I have had more requests of who they don't want to hire.
Okay, who are those?
Ooh, interesting.
They don't. I've had quite a few requests that they don't want to hire people who were political party planners or political event planners.
Yeah.
On either side.
Yep.
I think people. That was one that kind of threw me for a loop, and I'm not going to tell you what side they said no on, but but they have said I don't want somebody who's done that because I don't like that kind of background. So that was the first time I think that I've ever had that one thrown at me.
That's interesting.
But I haven't received any like really odd jobs that I sat there and said,
Well, you'll call us the next time you get a really odd job.
Oh yeah, because now I'm going to seek it out. I'm going to be like, I'm trying to think. No, I really haven't had an odd one.
So what was the hardest job to fill, or the most challenging one over the past year then?
I think the most challenging one that I had this past year was they were looking for somebody who was bilingual in Spanish and English, who had about 60% of their experience level in trade shows, they didn't want to relocate anybody, and they wouldn't work virtually. And it was in Pittsburgh.
That is very specific.
So I have,
it was very specific.
That is
and
specific.
It finally had to get down to the point where I said, "You are going to have to relocate somebody."
So they finally gave in.
And they finally did relocate somebody, but then you're dealing with convincing somebody to move to Pittsburgh.
Which is really very nice, by the way.
Shout out to Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh's a beautiful city,
It's fantastic
but
now.
it's very hard to find somebody who will pick up and move an entire family to a place that they don't know about. And and that's where my job comes in, is that I found this person who happened to be born and raised in Pittsburgh. And they were bilingual. They weren't completely fluent, but they were willing to go back to school for it. So everybody has to compromise. You can't exactly find the perfect person all the time. And I think this is a big key that everybody's going to have to accept in the next couple of years, is that everybody is going to have to compromise and do a little bit more training and mentoring, and everything old is new again.
That's true. I wanted to end it on the are there any Dawnisms, stereotypes of Gen Z that we should start? Like, what do you think of that? Like, we know about the millennials. Like, should we rag on the Gen Z generation coming up?
Again, Gen Z, because I was looking, I did a little research on what a Gen Z was, and I was also talking to somebody the other day about it. And Gen Z is going to be the first generation that doesn't know cursive.
Okay.
They barely know a keypad. They're going to be the push button generation, of on the screen. So we're going to be dealing with a generation that is used to high technology. I mean, computers to them, email to them is going to be archaic. They're going to be the iPad generation. Everything's going to be done that way. So can we come down on them yet? No, not just yet, but we have to be ready for them to know what their expectations of and what their knowledge base is. You know, you can't come down hard on somebody who doesn't have computer skills or doesn't know how to work on a laptop when they never had a laptop. So we're going to be growing to a whole new generation, and this generation is big. I think they're bigger than the millennials. And
smart.
And they're smart, and they also are very vocal.
Yep.
So I think that we have to get ready for them. I don't know how to do that. It's kind of scary. But and I think we've been a little too hard on the millennials also.
I think so, too. I think they're fantastic.
I think we've been a little too hard on the millennials. Our generation, or the generations above, have got so comfortable in what their knowledge base was, and then all of a sudden technology came along. And I don't know about you, but I was at first the type of person who just teach me what I need to know to get me through this absolute moment, and don't teach me anything else. And that doesn't work anymore, because we've got a whole new set of candidates coming in who want to learn, who just don't want to get through the moment, and who are going to be leading us. So we got to be ready for them.
Well, Dawn, thanks so much. We will continue to check in with you about hot jobs and trends in the event and meeting industry workforce. And before we go, just let everybody know where they can reach you. LinkedIn, obviously, right?
Yes. And my email is Dawn, DAWN, at meetingjobs, MEETINGJOBS.com. Also on my webpage, which is meetingjobs.com. And if you wanted the old-fashioned way by phone, 212-689-7686.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dawn. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, and thank you for thinking of me, and we'll talk next year at this time.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye. Okay, we're back in our BizBash podcast, GatherGeeks studio. And, David, Dawn was sharing a lot of uncertainty in the economy. There's a small candidate pool because people are hunkering down and not willing to leave stable jobs. But those hiring people in the industry are being very picky as well. The companies are looking for niches and not particularly willing to consider a range of candidates. And I'm wondering, are they being too picky? What do you think? And, one of the trends you talk a lot about, David, is the morphing of the event industry, but it doesn't sound like that's happening in that world.
I think we still have memories of all the way back to 9/11, and we have memories to the recession. And so we know the good times doesn't last forever. And so people, rather than thinking, go for the top end, let's go for the least risk in many cases. So they're being picky, even though they may not be able to really afford to be.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about this question of transferable skills among different niches in the event community? Do you think they're transferable, or do people need to be educated on if you're planning this type of event, you really do have skills to plan that type of event too?
But people have to be willing to take the risk to tell you the nuances of the differences. I think the skills are transferable, but it's so much easier not to have to train anybody. And we're talking the same language, but we're talking different ways of describing that language in many cases. We're saying the same thing, but the people in the trade show business talk about it differently than the people in the festival business, perhaps. And so I do believe that once you take the leap, you're okay, but taking that leap is a little extra risk.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of risk, we talked a lot about doing these jobs virtually from home. Are you sold on that after our conversation?
Well, you know what? I think it's a reality. To get the best people, you have to be flexible. So sometimes you have to suck it up and be willing to go with flexible workforce. And I've had good experiences with it, and I've had bad experiences with it. How about you? You hire a lot of freelance people, and they don't come into the office, but you communicate well with them.
We do. We make it work. We have contributors from all over North America. And, well, it's a reality that if they're in San Francisco, they're covering events in San Francisco for us. So, yeah, there are a range of communication tools available that, and so we make good use of those. And, everybody lives in the cloud these days. So you are able to collaborate.
But I think you have to be you have to be open-minded now today. I think that's the key difference, no matter whether you're a millennial person or an Xer or a boomer. The idea of leaving your ego a little bit at the door and taking that leap. I think the whole idea with what Dawn was talking about is you have to take the leap, but people are not necessarily ready to jump.
Another one of her insights that I really loved was that your job description is a marketing piece. And for companies looking to hire younger workers, she will be frank with them and tell them, your job description just isn't cool. So it's really interesting to think about, are your company values and the culture of your company coming through in the job description. I will add the caveat: don't try too hard, because sometimes people can go too far in the other direction, and nothing screams inauthenticity as somebody trying to sound hip, but they really aren't.
Especially when the different generations are making the judgment calls, because boomers will look at all of this purposefulness and they'll eye roll, But someone hiring that's a millennial or may not. I mean, maybe they really take it seriously. So it's totally up to the two audiences. And does it have that magic spark that gets you the job?
Or gets the right candidates to apply for your job.
Absolutely. Great. So Beth, what's going on at BizBash?
We have just released our New York Top 100. We are so excited about it. It's our annual list of the best events in New York City, divided into several categories, from trade shows and conventions to tech events to fashion events to benefits. There are new events to this year's list, and we shook up the rankings in other categories. So check that out on bizbash.com. This story is also posted to our social sites, so you can tell us what you think the top events are as well.
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on. This episode is sponsored in part by Concierge.com. Event management software is supposed to save you time, but it rarely does. What you really need is event management software that comes with a team of event and hospitality pros. Concierge.com by Condé Nast offers ingenious registration and guest management software along with the people you need to manage it all. Go to Concierge.com to see how we can help you and how we make every guest feel like a VIP. This episode is also sponsored by Event Leadership Institute. Invest in yourself and your staff with self-paced online event education designed to fit into your busy schedule. Subscribe to the Event Leadership Institute for only $25 per month and gain access to an extensive on-demand video library of classes, as well as interviews with industry leaders. Best of all, you can watch classes in small pieces or all at once. For more information, visit eventleadershipinstitute.com.